Hello, welcome back to Diverse Thinking, Different Learning. I appreciate you being here. I know that you could be doing a number of different things at this time, and it means a lot that you're choosing to listen to this podcast. Today, we're diving into a topic that is top of mind for many families, the transition to college for neurodivergent students. My guest, Dr. Eric Endlich, is a psychologist and founder of Top College Consultants. You may remember him from a previous episode, and I am so thrilled to welcome him back. His work focuses on helping neurodivergent students navigate the complex journey to and through college. In today's conversation, we're talking about what it really means to be college ready, not just academically, but emotionally, socially, and functionally. Whether your child is applying next year, heading off to campus this fall, or still early in high school, this episode is packed with essential guidance. So let's dive in.
Millions of kids struggle with learning, processing, and social emotional difficulties. These challenges interfere with their ability to reach their full potential. Dr. Karen Wilson is here to help. Her extensive background in pediatric neuropsychology and higher education have prepared her for this unique mission. Listen as she delivers content to inform, educate, and empower parents and educators. This will enable you to identify challenges that kids face and get them on the road to achieving their full potential. This is Diverse Thinking, Different Learning by Child Nexus.
Dr. Endlich, thank you so much for coming back on the podcast.
My pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
I really enjoyed our conversation last time. And, we were just speaking before we hit record about how we are connected to a lot of the same people who work in college transition in this space. And so, again, I'm thrilled to have you back to talk about this topic that keeps coming up as a new group of students enter high school or transitioning out of high school, preparing applications for college and university. So again, the timing couldn't be better.
Yeah, and I enjoy following the work you do as well.
Thank you. Thank you. So I know your work centers on college readiness and transition for neurodivergent students, for listeners who may not be familiar. And it's interesting because one of the things you have said is that getting into college is the easy part for neurodivergent students. I'd love for you to explain what you mean by that.
Sure. Yeah. I found myself saying that so many times that I ended up writing an article, blog post called Getting into College is the Easy Part. You can find the link on our website. So the reason I say that is because I feel like there's so much focus in our culture, and particularly in some schools and some towns, about getting into college. What do I need to do to get into college? What are colleges looking for? Do I need to take the SAT? What kind of grades and scores do I need? How many AP courses do I need? All this stuff, do I have a chance of getting into this college? So much focus about getting in the door, which is a little bit misplaced because most students who are reasonably capable can go to college. But not enough focus on what it takes to get through college and to get out the other side, because there's a substantial number of students who don't graduate, who enroll and, with high hopes, and parents are paying a lot of money in tuition, and then they don't end up with a degree. So we really want to be sure that when students start college, that they can see it through and end up with a degree, because half a degree is not really worth as much in the workplace. And it's not great for a student's self-esteem to not get all the way through.
Yes, absolutely. And, you talk about getting in is, the easy part. And, we're going to be talking today about that second part, that most important part, which is
what's the hard part?
Being ready once you're there, and we know that students with learning and thinking differences are at greater risk for not completing college. And we want to make sure that we're setting them up to achieve the goals that they want to pursue by getting a college or university degree. There is a difference, and you talk about this, between being college capable and college ready, and you've kind of alluded to that about, how people can get in. But talk about that difference between college capable and college ready.
Sure. And let me also just preface it by saying I don't have the expectation that all students should go to college or necessarily want to go to college, or to get a so-called 4-year bachelor's degree. They can go to community college, they can start a business, they can go straight into the workforce, go into the military, the Peace Corps. There's lots of alternatives out there. But for those who do want to go to college, if they're already in high school taking challenging courses and doing well academically, getting A's, B's, what have you, in AP courses, honors courses, dual enrollment courses where they're taking courses at a community college, then we can be fairly confident that they'll be able to handle the rigor of courses in college, that they are so-called college capable of the academics. It's all the other pieces. If we're talking about being a residential student, moving into a residence hall, moving away from your family or your guardian, then there's so many other things that go along with being successful in college besides being able to, handle the papers and the quizzes and tests, such as being able to get along with a roommate, being able to self-advocate with a professor, being able to monitor your mental health status and take action if you are struggling emotionally when you're in college, being able to handle your hygiene, your media use, your sleep, so many other pieces that go along with that big transition to being more independent.
Yes. And I think a lot of that has to do with the expectations and the environment for high school versus college in terms of what students will be able to do and should be able to do and be asked to do when they make that transition, particularly if they are living in residence and living away from home, many for the first time.
Yeah. And there's a couple of key differences from high school to college that families should know about. Some of it, if you've gone to college yourself, you already know that it's a much less structured day. Students, when they're in high school, tend to have a long day at school, a lot of classes, stuff going on after school, like sports, practice, or clubs, or maybe SAT prep, or what have you. And so they have a very structured long day. And in the case of our students, often with a lot of supports, if they're on an IEP or a 504 plan, a special education plan in high school. And then that shift to college is much less structured. They may have entire days in their week when they don't have any classes at all, and it's really up to them to structure their time. So that's one big challenge. The other big difference that folks don't always know about is that the laws that apply to disabilities in college are different from the laws that apply in high school. And one of the key ways that plays out is that school districts in K through 12 have an obligation to identify disabilities and to ensure that students are successful by providing the supports and accommodations that students need. So a student with a disability in high school who's been identified is having the services kind of delivered to them automatically. They don't really need to lift a finger, as it were, to get the help they need. In college, it's almost the reverse. There are supports and accommodations available, but it is entirely incumbent on the student to seek those out, because the college is only required to accommodate students who've identified themselves as having a disability. They are not required in any way to make sure that students are successful.
Right. And that's where that self-advocacy piece becomes even more important because, I know a lot of parents and caregivers who continue to provide support for their teens all the way up through high school. They're the ones making sure that the IEP is being put in place. They're the ones meeting with the IEP team. And many times the students have never even been part of that meeting and have never had to advocate for any accommodations being implemented at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I completely get that. I'm a special needs parent myself. I went through that process. I understand why parents do that and why you feel sort of pulled to continually be on the front lines fighting and advocating for your child. But that needs to shift if they're going to move away from home and go to college. Or be in the workplace. You need to start kind of trading places with your child so that they're in the front seat driving the bus, so to speak, and you're in the back seat coaching and cheering them on. It doesn't mean you have to just kind of leave them to their own devices. You can say, hey, this is how, let's talk about how your IEP is set up. Let's talk about how you refill your medications. Let's come up with a system for getting up on time in the morning. But ultimately, the student has to start to move into that role of being in charge.
Right. And that's that executive functioning piece. And we've talked about executive functioning a great deal on this podcast, but self-advocacy, developing those executive functioning skills, continuing to develop them, building independence in high school, from what I'm hearing from you, is really critical. Are there important skills that are important specifically for students who are leaving for college, things that caregivers can start working with their teens on, in high school, and should be working on building those? And the laundry's coming to mind.
Yeah. Well, self-advocacy is sort of the big picture, but sort of drilling down, I would have parents step back, think about your child's day from the time they get up in the morning to the time they go to bed at night. And what parts of that are you involved in? Are they getting themselves up, or are you getting them up? Are they making their own breakfast? Are they remembering what they need to bring to school? Are they keeping track of their assignments? Are they managing their eating healthy, exercising, staying clean, making counseling appointments, doctor's appointments, refilling medications? Kind of go through the day and think about all the stuff that they need, and how much are they doing and how much are you doing? And how can you gradually shift some of that over? Now, does it mean that students have to have all of that mastered? A lot of students go off to college not knowing how to cook, and they just eat in the residence hall, or they, order food out or go to fast food. Some of this can happen over time. And although you want as many of these skills to be mastered prior to finishing high school, students can also take a gap year. So they're working on some of these skills between high school and college, or they can get, fairly robust support while they're in college. So they're continuing to refine some of these skills in college if they're part of the way there, but not all the way there. So I don't want parents to panic and think like, oh, my kid I do all these things for my kids. That means they can't go to college. No, they can, but, come up with a plan, come up with a kind of a long-term plan so that they're on their way to more independence.
Right. And listeners are going to be at different stages. Some might be already thinking about this process and they have students in 9th grade, while others might have students in 12th grade and are making that jump in the fall.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And when we start working with kids in 9th and 10th grade, we can be kind of on top of this. If families come to us in 11th or 12th grade, then we're really more, we're certainly alerting them to it, but we don't have as much of a runway to work on these skills. But again, they can go to a gap year program. They can start college later. There's no requirement that you go straight to college. You can start college at any age.
Right. And we've talked about gap years on this podcast, and this might be a great time to ask this question since you brought it up. But when should a gap year be considered?
So I think probably most students, not just students with learning differences, can benefit from gap years. I think it would be great for all students to be thinking about that as an option. Certainly, if a student's kind of burnt out on school and they're capable of going to college and they want a degree, but they're really kind of like, I've been a student my whole life, I need to do something else for a change. Just that sort of emotional burnout would be one indication. The other would be, lack of college readiness, that they don't have the executive function skills quite, or they don't have some of these other self-advocacy pieces. So giving them another year to buff up those skills. And you can do that through many means. A gap year can look like a lot of different things. A gap year could be just getting a job, or a gap year could be going to a gap year program that's focused on helping you become college ready. And there's a lot of benefits. I wrote an article on the benefits of gap year. So again, not just for neurodivergent students, studies suggest that students who take a gap year when they start college, they're more focused. They know what they want to do for a career. They know what they want to study. They get better grades. They graduate on time. They're just more college ready. And you have another year of brain development. Let's not, overlook that you're a year older and your brain is continuing to develop. So those parts of the brain that help you manage time and impulses and organizational skills is more developed.
Yes, that's a really great point. It's like you're giving them the gift of time for those executive functioning skills to come on board. And at the same time, it's an opportunity to seek out support if they haven't had support for building those executive functioning skills while they've been in high school. And to also develop those self-advocacy skills and to have an increased awareness of their learning profile and what it is, what their strengths are and what they need in terms of support and their ability to ask for what it is that they need.
Yeah. So the self-advocacy is built on self-awareness. They need to know what those issues and challenges are so they can say to folks around them or to professionals, hey, I'm not really, I struggle with meeting deadlines. I struggle with staying focused. So help me figure out what resources are going to assist with that. One other sort of profile or situation where a student might, really think about a gap year would be is if their presentation to a college, whether it's their high school transcript, extracurriculars, what have you, is not as robust as they would like it to be. And if they're going to do something during that gap year that's going to really add to their portfolio or their life experiences, whether it's taking additional courses through something called a postgrad or PG year at a high school or at a college, if they're going to get more academic strength to their transcript during that gap year, if they're going to do some sort of project, maybe they're going to start a business or create a website or an app or something, they might be a better applicant to college a year later, a more attractive applicant.
Right. And again, it's also increases that self-awareness because you get to see, do you like being an entrepreneur? Right.
Right.
Do you like that internship that you're doing or traveling overseas, whatever that might be, to help you decide on what it is that you want to do when you do make that transition? Because many students know that they want to go to college, but they don't know what they want to study even once they get there.
Absolutely. Many people change their minds during college, or they study one thing in college and they do something else after they leave college. And lots of us have had more than one career. And that's totally fine. There's no shame in changing your mind.
And I think that's the norm now.
Yeah. And parents sometimes focus on, well, what can my kid do with a degree in this particular subject? I try to sort of zoom out and look at what are the skills you're going to acquire in college and what are the skills that are needed in the workforce. If you, do an internet search of the top skills that employers are looking for, it's typically not content knowledge. It's things like ability to work as a team, ability to problem solve, to be flexible, things like that, to analyze problems and brainstorm solutions. So just mental and social skills that you could learn in any number of college majors.
Right. And that takes us back to one of the things you said earlier about the fact that college, university might not be appropriate for everyone and is not the be all and end all in terms of having the life and the career that you ultimately want to have.
Yeah, I mean, it can be a big investment of time and money, and you really want to think about the return on investment for that time and money. Is this a degree that you need for what you are hoping to do with your life? There's certainly increasingly fields where you can get certificates rather than degrees to build skills and be career ready. And sometimes you can, if you're lucky, work for an employer who will help pay tuition. So wait and go to college when your employer will help pay for it.
Yes, absolutely.
One other thing, on the subject of money that I just want to throw out there that I don't always remember to mention is that there are public benefits that sometimes help families pay for services and even college tuition. So if your child's not on any associated with any public agencies like vocational rehabilitation or other agencies that your state may have, look into that because you may be surprised what your child's eligible and how much you can get support for, regardless of what your family's financial status is.
Right. I mean, there's so many factors to consider for families, and it can often feel very overwhelming, all of the things that they have to do to prepare young people for this transition. And like you were saying, ideally the transition preparation begins ninth, 10th grade, but that's not always the case. As we're thinking about building those important skills that you've talked about, executive functioning skills, self-advocacy, building self-efficacy, it's important, obviously, before you make that transition to college, but can students start building those skills when they arrive on campus?
Absolutely. I sort of alluded earlier that there's sort of 3 periods. You can work on these skills in high school, you can work on them between high school and college during 1 or more gap years, or you can continue to work on them, and probably in most cases will be continuing to work on them while you're in college. And you can do that through sort of pulling together your own resources. Maybe you hire your own executive function coach. Maybe you have a therapist who's going to help you work on emotion regulation skills. But there's a lot of resources in any college. And then there's even more resources in some colleges. So most colleges are going to have, disability accommodations available, career counselors, academic advisors, RAs, lots of other resources at the college, free peer tutoring, perhaps. But then some colleges go above and beyond those basics and offer a learning support program or an autism support program. And families often are wondering, how do you find these? So I've collected them all into a database, which you can find on our website. And you can sort it by state. So if you're saying, well, I just want to find the colleges with support programs in my particular state or a couple of states around me, you can easily sort that way through in our database.
Wonderful. Thank you for putting that together, because that will cut out a lot of time for a lot of families, because for students, being aware of the college resources is also critical. And beyond just, is there a learning disabilities office? Once students get on campus, knowing who has, when faculty office hours are, knowing that academic advising is available and where to go to get that. There's a lot to navigate in terms of resources and how to access them.
Yeah, and if you're a child whose parents didn't go to college or didn't go to college in this country, you might not even know what office hours are or why you should go to them. And there's so much that we want students to understand about accessing resources. And if they're in a support program, those folks are going to help guide them and say, here's the things you can do in college to be successful and graduate and get the most out of college. It's less about where you go to college than what you do while you're there. If you are really engaged and you find mentors and you do projects, research, study abroad, all the things that college has to offer, join clubs, you will get so much more out of college, regardless of what the name of your college is.
Right. And in addition to support that's available on campus, some students might seek to access outside support. So,
right.
For example, continue with their therapist that they might have.
Yeah. And there's a handful of programs out there that families can hire if they, if you end up at a college that doesn't offer a whole lot of support, that doesn't offer additional supports, because that's the college that's closest to home, or it's the least expensive, or it's one that you just fell in love with, you can still find supports outside the college. And we, closely track the companies that offer those supports. I know the folks who run them, and we help connect students with those programs. I just wanted to go back to the list building about finding those supportive colleges. You might think, oh, well, can't I just go online and Google colleges for ADHD, colleges for autism, or can I use an AI tool, a chat GPT, to help me find those colleges? That kind of information is not always super accurate, I found. I've done it myself. You'll find online lists, and some of those lists are probably, they're just not really well vetted. And AI doesn't have the ability to kind of understand what colleges offer, because it's not really a person. It's just an algorithm. So I think it's worth finding vetted lists. Our list is not the only list out there, but I have put a lot of time into trying to keep it up to date and complete.
That's wonderful.
And one of the things I put in our database is, how much do these programs cost? Because most of them do have an extra fee, which is sometimes a unpleasant surprise for parents, that they're going to have to pay more than the tuition and room and board. They're going to also have to pay for this program. Some of them don't. I was just talking to a program director this morning. They very zealously ensure that their program doesn't cost students extra, but some of them do, some of them don't. And I have that information in the database.
Wonderful. And I'll get that link from you. So I'll make sure to link to that database in the show notes. I think we've got listeners who've kind of fall into a few camps, but two kind of jump out at me. It's the parents, caregivers whose teens will be applying to college and university next year, and those who have already applied, already been accepted, and are making the leap in the fall. So let's start with the parents whose teens will be applying next year. So they might be in 11th grade now. The student might be in 11th grade now. Are there things that the parents, caregivers should be doing to support those teens during this year that they're going to have before they make that transition, if that's something that they want to do?
Sure. I mean, there's so many pieces. We've talked about some of them, so I'm not going to reiterate what we've already covered about, building skills. If you can tour colleges in person, that's great. Not everyone has access to that because of where they live or because they're working a lot of hours or whatever it might be. If there are colleges within driving distance that you can get to, it's great to go in person, even if those aren't the colleges your child's going to apply to, because they want to get out of your state and go somewhere that has a different climate politically or climatically. Going to those colleges in person helps students figure out what they do and don't like, and then helps them build the profile of the ideal college. As they go to a variety of colleges, large, small, urban, suburban, public, private, they start to realize, I didn't realize it before, but this is really important to me in a college. Now that I've seen this, I really want more colleges that offer this. Or I didn't like the architecture, so I don't want to go to colleges that look like this one. And so kind of developing that profile before it comes time to apply. I think it's important for students to have a very big role in that because they're the ones who are going to be in college. So they need to love the college. It can't just happen to be the one that their parents went to that they think is great, which may or may not be the best fit for them. And parents sometimes have very specific ideas about what their child needs, and sometimes they may be dead on accurate that the child would do better in a smaller college or with smaller classes or whatever it might be. Other times it's things like, looking for a name brand college, which really has no impact on the experience while you're there. It's fun to put that bumper sticker on your car or wear that sweatshirt, but you're going to be living there for several years. You really it needs to be a good fit. And it needs to be a place where you can make friends. Unless you really don't want to make friends. I don't want to assume that everyone does, but a lot of students want to have a good social experience in college. So you need to look for not just to have the major I want, but does it have the kind of students that I'm going to want to hang out with? And that's why kind of going there and getting the vibe, the intangible vibe of what are the students like at this college? Are there enough students here like me?
Yes. And when they're on the campus and doing those tours, are there places on campus that you recommend that they go, whether that's the dining hall or the library or other?
I love to go to the dining hall. I was at a college tour 2 days ago, and I did in fact eat in the dining hall. I love to know what the food is like.
Yes.
And if I were a student and I was going to be eating there 3 meals a day, I'd want to know what the food's like. Another thing for parents is if you can set up a meeting with disability services or if there's a support program, set up a meeting with the director of the program. Those may or may not be run by disability services. Sometimes they are, sometimes they're not. You can do a deeper dive into what is the support going to be like for my child at this college. And I have a blog post with a list of questions to ask. Once in a while, disability services won't meet with you until you're a student, but in most cases they will, and you can really get a feel for that. I was talking to a parent earlier this week who said, this one of the colleges we looked at, it was just one person running the office, and it just didn't feel very like there was a lot of depth there to what they could offer. And sometimes you can't really tell that from the website.
Right. And you get a sense of the kind of support that you'll be receiving and how easy it is to access that support. Like you were saying, if there's one person in the office or they ask you to email them, versus you can just walk in and talk to someone.
Yeah. And sometimes people want to know, where's the office located? What does it look like? What's the if I'm going to come here for study halls or to meet with staff, is this a comfortable place for me? Do I like the staff? Going back to your question about sort of what else to sort of visit, the tours are pretty standard. So you get led around the campus by a current student. You don't really get to choose what you see for the most part, unless it's you luck out and you get a one-on-one tour, which I occasionally do. And then you can say, yeah, I do want to see this department. I don't care about this particular building. But above and beyond the standard tours, if you know what you want to study, you can reach out to that department in advance and say, hey, I'm going to be on campus. I might be applying to your college. I'm really interested in this field. Is there anybody in the department who has a few minutes to sit down with me and help me learn more about the department? Because if you do know what you want to study, having a sit down with a professor there can be really enlightening as to how does this, biology or philosophy department differ from the department at some other college.
Yes. And even getting that permission to attend even a lecture, particularly those big lecture halls, would be important as well, because many students have never, sat in a class that had more than 25 people. And now you might be sitting in a lecture hall with 100 to 400.
Yeah. And seeing the classrooms gives you a sense of like, how big are these classes? Although you can find that data online, what the average class size is. One other thing is you may not be able to visit for a variety of reasons. Maybe you want to apply to colleges all over the country and you can't be flying all over the country while you're in school, in high school. Or maybe you're an international student and you're not going to get to the college until you start or until later on. That's okay. You can apply to colleges you haven't seen. You can still learn a lot about them. You can do virtual tours. You can talk with college reps who might be visiting your high school. Once you get in, if you're an American student, you live in this country, and you've gotten into college, especially if you apply early and you have a few months to decide and you've narrowed down your list. Okay, there's 3 colleges that I think I like, but I haven't seen all of them. You can go in the spring of senior year, which actually is an even more in-depth a visit, typically. If it's an accepted or admitted students event, those are great events. And if you're a high school junior, look out for the special events like open houses or junior day. Look for those more in-depth experiences than just the basic 1-hour college tour.
Yes. And for caregivers who have teens who have decided to make the leap to college in the fall, is there anything that you recommend they do over these next couple months to prepare? Because they're going to be starting in August,
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of steps. I sent out an email to the families I work with prior to transitioning. One is, if you're going to be seeking disability accommodations, jump on that right away. As soon as you put down your deposit and you have a college student ID or college email address, reach out to disability services and say, I'm going to be starting in the fall. I need accommodations. Can we get the process started? Don't wait until classes start, because you're going to have your hands full as a student. So get the disability accommodations process started. Certainly, some of the things the college will tell you, if you want housing, this is the process. This is what you need to do. In some colleges, housing is at a premium, so you want to get in the queue early and get the best housing options that you can. Start learning about clubs. Reach out to those clubs so that you have another way to make friends and pursue your interests, so that you're not just kind of wandering around friendless as a college freshman. And then for parents, there are some forms to think about getting signed prior to your child starting college. And if you go on the internet, search for, what legal forms do I need when my kid starts college? There's a bunch of articles on this. Parents don't always realize that the colleges treat their child as an adult, even if they're not chronologically an adult. colleges don't communicate with parents by default. So your kid could, I hate to say this, they could be not going to class, they could be failing class, they could be on probation, and the college wouldn't even tell you unless you had certain forms signed releasing that information. Same thing with releasing health information, as you know, being a healthcare provider,
Yes, right.
that if you don't get that HIPAA waiver signed, your child could have a crisis and you wouldn't necessarily be informed of it.
Yeah. And it sounds like for some students, based on the conversation we've had thus far, a bridge program, if the college offers it, would be helpful as well to kind of get acclimated to the residency, to a lot of the things that are available to them on campus.
Great point. Yes. And that's not necessarily a standard thing. Most colleges will have some sort of orientation for all first-year students, but the support programs, the learning support programs, autism support programs do often have some sort of bridge program, which can be great for students. I didn't have that kind of program per se, but I did start college in the summer before, the typical time. And there were fewer students on campus. I only took a couple of courses. So when college, started officially in the fall, so to speak, I was already pretty comfortable living in a dorm and going to class and navigating the campus.
Yes. And I think that a lot of the work that you do really alleviates a lot of anxiety. And
we try. That's the idea. Yeah.
Yes, for caregivers and students, because like I said before, it can feel overwhelming. And for a lot of parents and caregivers who've been kind of supporting their young ones from early elementary school, making sure that they're getting all the support they need and advocating for them and having the IEP in place, the 504 plan, or other kinds of supports in place if they're attending independent private schools. It's hard to let go, right? It's hard to kind of to leave your teen, to put all of those responsibilities in your teen's hands, to manage those as well.
Yeah, applying to college is a big project. Someone's got to manage it. Sometimes it's the student if they're highly capable. Sometimes it's the parent, but there's a lot to learn. And if you're not in the higher education business, you're kind of trying to play catch up to learn about what's the story now with standardized tests or DEI or whatever it might be. It's a fast moving field. And as you said, there can be a lot of anxiety. I had a student I worked with who's a senior who's going on to college in the fall, and the caregiver that I dealt with, who wasn't her parent, was really anxious about how things were going to go. She was not particularly strong academically, so her caregiver was worried. What if she doesn't get into any college? I'm like, this is all about building the college list carefully. And she ended up getting into every college she applied to. So it's partly choosing the right colleges. It's partly kind of getting stuff done well and on time.
Yes.
But yeah, it can be very anxiety provoking.
Yes. And it sounds like from what you're saying too, when you're making this list, there should be other non-college options available as well. You should be thinking about for some students.
Sometimes, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Sometimes, the backup plan might be community college. It might be a gap year and apply again a year later. So, yeah.
Yeah. Dr. Endlich, I want to thank you for coming back on the podcast, but also for putting together all of these resources that have been extremely helpful to so many families. And I know some of our listeners are hearing to some of the things that you have talked about and are wanting to connect with those resources. I'm going to make sure I link to them in the show notes. But if listeners want to learn more about you and about Top College Consultants, what is the best way for them to connect with you?
The best way would be to start with the website, which is topcollegeconsultants.com. Or they can email me, Eric, ERIC, at topcollegeconsultants.com. I also have social media presence, but start with the website and take it from there.
Wonderful. And I will link to that in the show notes, and also link to our previous conversation and conversations about gap years. I'm so glad that you said that you have a blog post about that. It seems like you have a blog post about everything related to college transition. So we'll be sure to share that with our listeners.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening. I hope you're walking away with actionable steps and greater clarity, from building self-advocacy skills in high school to exploring resources both on and off campus. There's so much we can do to support our students during this critical transition. If you want to learn more about Dr. Endlich and the work he does with top college consultants, you can find all the links in the show notes, as well as links to other resources related to college transition. So be sure to check them out. And if you've enjoyed this episode, found it helpful, please share it with someone who may need to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an important conversation. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to Diverse Thinking, Different Learning by Child Nexus. For more resources, visit us online at childnexus.com.